Okay, so instead of talking about how Starfield is a disappointment compared to its siblings, because I don't need flashbacks of my childhood, today we're asking a very simple question. Can Bethesda turn Starfield around in the gaming sphere in the same way that CD Projekt Red did with Cyberpunk, Hello Games did with No Man's Sky, or my favorite redemption arc, Square Enix and Final Fantasy XIV? Now, for context, I'm an older gamer. My first game was Oregon Trail on the Apple II way back in 2nd grade, and I've been gaming ever since. I didn't leave my mom's basement until I got married, which is a miracle by itself. As such, I have memories of the good old days when games were full and complete experiences out of the box. Something that has long been murdered by the gaming industry and the body hidden under the floorboards until Larian resurrected the body and revealed Baldur's Gate 3 to the community, reminding older gamers like myself and showing younger gamers what the gaming landscape used to look like once upon a time. Which brings us to the disappointment that is Starfield. Regardless of whether you love or hate the game, the truth is that Starfield is flawed on a level that players weren't expecting. A discussion that, lucky for you, we're not getting into here. And right now, while Bethesda whips up simple patches for the game that removes fun exploits and tries to fix other little broken things, modders have been doing what they do best. Making bigger, more important fixes like improving the bullet sponge issue enemies have, and changing simply bafflingly bad decisions like the uselessness of food even when it has its own dedicated skill tied to it. Right now, if you sift past the Star Wars weapon and armor reskins, and through the massive booby mods slapping you in the face, you'll find the quality of life mods that improve the gameplay experience on an immense level. Ship mods that, with a little more work, could rival the copy-pasted creations that exist in the vanilla game, and so much more. Let me point out that the first official Bethesda patch that fixed or changed 4 things, including removing exploits, was released on October 9th, and by the end of the day, on the 8th of October, modders had created over 5,000 mods for the game. The last being Skip Vladimir Temple Quest CCR hotkey. We know this because the link literally tells you which number of Starfield mod it was. Now, with that in mind, let's switch gears and I'll give you some context for what we're talking about next. Final Fantasy XIV famously flopped on its launch. Systems were half-assed, simple mechanics like jumping weren't available, and a combat system that felt really bad to work with, and we shouldn't even try to explain the mess of an auction house that they tried to pass off as remotely usable. Reviled by players and stockholders alike, the Final Fantasy team used the world's lore to create a cataclysmic event that destroyed the world, paving the way for the game to be rebuilt from the ashes. And today, 13 years later, it has completed its original storyline and moved on to its glorious future. Until recently, it was the gold standard for what resurrecting a game from the ashes of commercial failure looked like. No Man's Sky has a similar story. It was a hotly anticipated title, promised a limitless game world with unlimited exploration, and a sci-fi gaming experience that the world had never seen before. Then it released, and the reality of what it was slapped players in the face with its vast, empty repetitiveness. It was probably the greatest gaming disappointment of all time, since it was the first time a game had used procedurally generated content to such a large degree, something that many gamers in the community were worried about would cause problems for Starfield. And spoiler alert, they were right. Since then, Hello Games has kept working on No Man's Sky, and over the years have largely created the game that they promised in the very beginning. While it's not the runaway success that many players were hoping for, it's still enjoyed by thousands of players and actively being supported by the devs. Cyberpunk's release was also disappointing, to put it lightly. But it eclipsed the resurrection story of Final Fantasy XIV thanks to the colossal success of its recent patch 2.0 update. For many players, Cyberpunk at release was outright unplayable. And for those who could play it, they found all kinds of problems. The game was so unplayable that refunds were actively offered to players unhappy with their purchase regardless of the amount of time they played the game. This was the first time refunds of this magnitude were freely given by Steam, which is a signal to how bad that release really was. Then, today, almost 3 years later, Cyberpunk received its much anticipated 2.0 update, which completely revamped the game and brought it from the graveyard of dead and bad games back into the realm of hyped and loved games. By accepting their failure and embracing the drive to improve the experience for its players, 3D Projekt Red revitalized their image and refreshed interest in their games, as well as building interest in a possible sequel to Cyberpunk 2077, which is really wild to me. All of these companies decided to put forth genuine effort to improve the game they released to failure and succeeded. And in doing so, their respective communities have supported them for their efforts. Which brings us back to Starfield and the main question of this video. Will Bethesda choose to put that kind of effort into fixing the bigger problems in Starfield that modders can't fix, and bring Starfield up to the same level of polish that No Man's Sky, Final Fantasy XIV, and Cyberpunk 2077 were able to put into their games after release? Things like the sheer boring emptiness of the environments, the lacking diversity in enemies, weapons that lack a futuristic design from 300 years in the future, and the uninspired quest designs, and the apparent handful of randomly placed POIs that make the game's exploration overall feel really repetitive. These are all things that might be fixed by modders on the surface level, but the core of these systems built into the game can only be fixed by Bethesda. Modders might be able to port skins from Cyberpunk into Starfield, but the systems that make using those weapons amazing or garbage are up to the devs. Melee combat in Starfield is, to put it lightly, utterly horrendous, bordering on obscenely lazy, while Cyberpunk is quite the opposite. And no matter how cool a weapon looks, if the systems built into the game don't make it awesome to use in combat, what's the point in using it? Modders can only do so much, which means it's really up to Bethesda to fix what's utterly broken and awful about Starfield's foundation. So, will Bethesda try to capitalize on their reputation of modder support in order to do as little work as possible to improve the game, or will they attempt to revitalize their image and put forth the tremendous effort that would be required to bring Starfield up to the technical level that players were expecting? Unfortunately for everyone, Bethesda isn't really known for their technical prowess, and their modder support doesn't seem to be that strong. If you spend any time in the Starfield modder Discord or have played around with the modding tool Xedit, you'll become acutely aware that the system they have in place isn't really a strong foundation for elaborate mods that are designed to significantly change the game. This makes it dangerously easy to break the game altogether. But Bethesda is focusing on modder support, right? In addition to that, it's widely accepted that their dated creation engine is what holds them back when it comes to updating their old game design. And in some cases, it might even be argued that they deliberately don't fix obvious issues to maintain the charm of Bethesda jank that the company is known for. Whether it's the creation engine's fault or deliberate dev choices that make Bethesda jank, only the actual game developers will know for sure. But what we know as players is that Bethesda can create a better game world than they have in Starfield. A world filled with adventure and surprises around every corner, and caves with more stuff inside them than just an empty cavern. And we all know they can absolutely offer up better storylines and immersion compared to what exists in Starfield at the moment. Now, let's talk about Bethesda's plan to support the game for years to come. Todd Howard said this, and I know that all of us assumed that at the time he meant through DLC, patches, and whatever monetization they had planned for the game. But in order for this plan to be profitable for the company, it needs to be good for the players. I mean, how are you going to make money from a game if there are too few players around to buy game things? We'll probably see the monetization system implemented around the same time we get the creation kit for modders, and we'll find out then exactly what that will do for the modding community and Starfield. But for now, we have no idea what it looks like. But the monetization mod system can go one of two ways for the players. First, the official mods they have in mind are low-impact, fun mods like new spacesuits or decorative pieces for outposts and homes. Or second, they're high-impact mods that almost become mandatory purchases like new weapon types, ship parts, or even POIs. We know that the Shattered Space DLC is coming up, but unless it comes with big game changes like Phantom Liberty brought for Cyberpunk, it's not going to do much for the company's image or the large group of people that want to love Starfield, but enjoy playing actually good games more. If Bethesda chooses to keep the game as it is and not implement huge improvements to the game, and at the same time expect players to pay for mods or whatever else they might have planned, I expect that they'll effectively push players away from Starfield and into the loving arms of its competitors. But if they create an Omega level event and change the game from the ground up before the Shattered Space DLC arrives, I would imagine that that would do wonders for their reputation and give us the game we were hoping for when all we had were the trailers. The interesting thing for Starfield is that Bethesda already has the means to implement this kind of Omega level event into the game already. What better way to reimagine and recreate their game than by sending players through the Unity into a universe where all of the gameplay changes could be implemented in a lore-friendly way? This is similar to what Final Fantasy XIV did with the Calamity. Players could leave the vanilla jank universe behind and restart in a universe where planetary rovers exist, load screens happen rarely, the worlds are open and properly filled with content and detail, a universe where their weapons technology has evolved alongside their space travel capabilities. Maybe even a universe where players can choose where doors and ladders and stairs go in a ship that they're building without the need for mods. Unfortunately for players who want Starfield to improve from its current state, this isn't up to the modders to save. It's up to Bethesda and whether they're willing to change some of the core systems that hold Starfield back. Thankfully, that's not completely outside of the realm of possibility, because right now, while Starfield isn't exactly Bethesda's best work, other companies have proven that it's not impossible to turn a game around completely and make it a wild success. So what will happen to the future of Starfield? Will Bethesda see the post-honeymoon phase reception of Starfield and decide to change gears to make Starfield a colossal success? Much in the same way CD Projekt Red was able to accomplish with Cyberpunk 2077? Or will they instead focus on their planned monetization systems and let the modders do the heavy lifting when it comes to duct taping changes into Starfield? Only time will tell, but we'll know for sure by the time the creation kit is released alongside news for the Shattered Space DLC and their monetization system for mods in the future. Not to mention what their choices will do to the anticipation for the next Elder Scrolls game. But what about you? Are you still playing Starfield or have you moved on to other games until it changes? Personally, I've been playing Cyberpunk 2077 and researching Ashes of Creation, which is a very deep topic. I'll be making videos on that in the future, so look forward to it. Let me know what you think about this topic in the comments below. But, as usual, like the video if you liked the video, dislike it if you disliked it, and until next time, I'm Space Coconut, and you're welcome.